The Firekeeper's Bride, Part 4. The letter was sealed with the royal crest, a symbol of power, of law, of control. Kael read the message again, his expression like stone. The king was coming. Seraphina had never seen Kael afraid. She had seen him angry, silent, distant, but never this. She took a slow breath. When Kael set the letter down, 3 days. Seraphina's fingers curled against the edge of the table. Why now? Kael exhaled. Because he does not trust me. He looked at her, something dark flickering behind his golden eyes. Or you? The Obsidian Keep had been quiet for weeks, but on the 3rd day, the silence shattered. The king's procession arrived at sunset, black banners trailing behind armored riders, the sigil of the Vaelmer throne gleaming in gold. The main gates opened, and King Edric himself rode through. He was not an old man, though his years sat heavy on his face. He carried himself like a warrior, his posture rigid, his dark eyes calculating. Kael stood at the entrance, his hands resting at his sides. Seraphina stood beside him, her back straight, her heartbeat steady. She would not look weak, not before a man who had tried to make her a pawn. The king dismounted gracefully, his gaze sweeping the courtyard. Then he looked at Kael. "You're still standing," he said, his voice smooth. "That's good." Kael did not bow. Seraphina watched the way the king's jaw tightened. A man like Edric did not like being disrespected. But Kael was not his servant. Not anymore. The king's men sat up in the great hall, speaking in hushed voices, watching everything. Seraphina felt their eyes on her, studying, measuring. She knew why. She was supposed to be Kael's bride, a leash tied around his fire, a test to see if he could be controlled, and yet here she was, unburned, unafraid. She met their stares without flinching. She was not a queen, but she had been raised among nobles. She knew how to play this game, and she would not lose. That night, a feast was held in the great hall. Seraphina sat between Kael and the king. It was not a warm meal. It was a battlefield. King Edric spoke lightly of trade routes, border disputes, royal matters. But Seraphina saw the way he watched Kael, like a man watching a beast behind a cage. Finally, he turned to Seraphina. "You've been here for weeks," he said. "Tell me, my dear, has the Firekeeper treated you well?" Seraphina lifted her cup, her expression smooth. "Well enough," the king hummed. "You're very brave." It was not a compliment. It was a warning. Seraphina smiled. "Bravery is often mistaken for survival, Your Majesty." The king's lips twitched. He was amused, but not fooled. Not yet. After the feast, the king summoned Kael to his private chambers. Seraphina waited outside, pacing. Then, after what felt like hours, Kael emerged. His expression was unreadable. "What did he say?" she asked. Kael's golden eyes met hers. "He wants me to lead his war," Seraphina stilled. A war. That was why the king had come. Not to see if Kael was loyal, but to force him to fight. Seraphina clenched her fists. "And if you refuse?" Kael exhaled slowly. "Then he will take you back to the capital, to be continued. Watch out for Part 5.